Hello, Council Bluffs Chamber members, and thanks for joining us today for our Meet the Candidate event uh, with Congresswoman Cindy Axne. She is the current sitting Congresswoman for Congressional District 3 here in Iowa. We heard uh, from her opponent, David Young, earlier today, this morning, and we're really excited to have her with us now to share her viewpoints on why she thinks she should earn re-election for the third congressional seat here in 8 days. So, Congresswoman, thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, I am so glad to be here with you all, and in particular in these really difficult times. Glad to be talking with you.
Thank you. And what we'll do, just to give you a little bit of a rundown, is I'll just say a few words and then I'll turn it to you to provide an update, a couple minutes on things that you're talking about, big issues that you're talking about with constituents out on the campaign trail. And then we'll turn it to Q&A. I will recommend that all the participants do type any questions that they have in the chat box. That's how we'll monitor those and make sure that we get those asked. But with that, I will turn it over to you, Congresswoman Axne, so you can talk a little bit about some things that you're hearing on the campaign trail that you want to keep our members informed of.
Yeah, well, once again, thank you so much for having me here, and thank you to the chamber just in general for the work that you're doing. It couldn't be more important because of what we're facing right now as a country. For those of you who aren't as familiar with me, I'm so proud to be Iowa's 3rd District Congresswoman. I'm a mom of 2 teenage boys. My husband and I are small business owners ourselves, and we understand the issues that Main Streets are facing across this country. So I was proud to be able to represent us during this time. And if you don't know, I spent a decade in state government serving under both Democratic and Republican governors and administrations. And I decided to run for office because I knew we needed to get things done. I'm a workhorse, not a show horse, and I know we've got major problems facing us. We have since I started this term, and we have for many years in this country, but I see opportunity as well. And certainly I believe that Iowa is poised to be at the forefront of opportunity that we have. So I'm anxious to get another term and continue to work in these challenging times because we've got so many issues that are out there, but I think we can hit them head on and make sure that we're improving our lives for every single person in this district. To let you know about some of the priorities that we've been talking about, certainly COVID has exposed, I think, problems that honestly have been around for years. Things like access to affordable quality healthcare, making sure that everybody has a job that can put money in their pocket, making sure that prescription drug prices are affordable, certainly good education for everybody. Many of you know I've been pushing for more trade schools and apprenticeship programs, 2-year programs, as well as 4-year programs. So whatever a young person or somebody wanting to be reskilled would like to do, we should be able to find an opportunity for them for a good paying job. And so I think a lot of the issues that we're seeing in COVID now really draw out why it's so important to address these issues head on and make sure that we're finding solutions for everyone. We've got to make sure that folks have a shot at success. That means connecting everyone in this district. I'm so proud of the work that has been done out in Council Bluffs, in particular with the Blink or B-Link program, to make sure that our kids and those families are connected. And I know that the city of Council Bluffs has really taken it upon themselves to make sure that that agenda was addressed. And I'm so grateful for the work that our communities do in making sure that that happens. So in moving forward, we've got a lot to do. We've got to make sure that we're expanding those skills and trade school programs. We've got to address the cost of college. We've got to make sure that we lower the cost of healthcare and the cost of prescription drugs, all bills that I have been a co-sponsor on, and that if they weren't sitting at the foot of the Senate right now, we could actually have a lot more money in the pockets of people and make their lives a little bit easier right now. But I've also been working on things that I think are really important to our district in this country, like ensuring that we don't outsource jobs. I want to make sure that we create good jobs right here in Iowa and in the United States and build our economy, as opposed to having large corporations outsource jobs, having them have the opportunity to take their revenue offshore into tax havens. Another bill that I wrote, because I believe that we've got to start making sure that we invest in American jobs, in American people, and make sure that we have the best benefits, and that the largest corporations and the wealthiest among us aren't using systems that help them get ahead at the expense of hardworking Iowans like we have right here in our 3rd district. So I've been working a lot on holding Wall Street accountable, making sure that we support Main Street, making sure that we address the issues of rural Iowa and rural America. I certainly want folks to know how important places like Iowa are to big cities. When I tell everybody that every ball bearing for every Ford Explorer is made right here in this district, what that means is that's money in the pockets of a Detroit family. But you know what? They couldn't be doing that if it wasn't for great, hardworking Iowans. And so I think there's so much opportunity for us to bring back economic viability and prosperity to more rural states like ours, because we do provide the backbone for the people in this country, no matter if it's agriculture and manufacturing that results as for machinery, et cetera, as a result of that, or whether it's doing things like I talked about, those ball bearings or glass that goes into every Pella and Anderson window that goes out to homes across this country. We've got a lot to offer, and it's my job to make sure that people in Congress understand that, so that we bring back economic viability here to our district to expand opportunity for our families and for our small businesses. And the last thing I know we've got to get to questions, but I want you all to know, as a small business owner and as somebody who worked at the state for a decade, literally helping them be more efficient, there's nothing I like more than cutting through red tape and making sure that we limit bureaucracy, because if we have too much bureaucracy, we limit people's opportunity. And so I'm always looking for ways to get a job done better. I've got sharp elbows to make sure that that happens. I think government should be holding itself accountable and transparent. If you go to my website right now, you'll see I'm still tracking the flood money. I'm going to make sure of that $3 billion that it gets out to the Midwest floods, and that we get our share, and that I'm not going to rest, and I won't stop tracking it until every dollar gets in the pocket of Iowans. And that's what I'm doing for COVID money right now too. We have moved away too much from holding government accountable. We have not held elected officials to the transparency that they need to be. I'm trying to change that. I was named the most accessible freshman member of Congress because I held 57 town halls last year. Before COVID hit, I had just over 60 in every county every month. And I'm committed to the people in our district to make sure that I hear from them on a regular basis so that their voices can be heard out in Washington. And finally, I would say, we don't get anything done unless we do so in a way where we can work together. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce named me the most bipartisan of all the Iowa congressional members. I'm very proud of that. The half of the bills that I write are with a Republican co-sponsor. 85% of the bills that I have voted for have been bipartisan. And I think that if we are going to move together to uniting this country to provide economic support for people and fix our healthcare issues, that we need to work together. And I know that's what chambers do really well. So I'm pleased to be able to have that title, and I'm going to continue to work in that vein in Congress to get things done.
Well, thank you, Congresswoman. I can say that, I've had the opportunity to work with you when I was at the Ames Chamber of Commerce as well. You helped us set up a reception at the Ag Committee room in the House office buildings. And then you also worked with us to set up a meeting with Congressman Loebsack, and you and him met with our delegation as well. So you were not only open to those individuals here in this district, but we weren't even in your district, and you still you met with us. So we appreciated that, and I wanted to note that as well. But the first question that we have is, you mentioned it a little bit, is what will you do to bridge the gap between party lines? It sounds like obviously you have some rankings to show that you've done that, but how can you continue to do that, moving forward if reelected?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with just being open to take an idea that you have and welcome other people's input without thinking that you know the answer to everything. And that means going out and finding folks that you think that I think would work with me on these bills. I oftentimes look to people who, of course, represent the Midwest, who have industries that are similar to ours, and who I have seen a track record of getting things done. It shows to me that they're willing to work with other people. And so I'm going to continue to work with, I do quite a bit of work with our Nebraskans. including quite a bit with Representative Bacon, certainly with Troy Balderson out of Ohio. He and I are working on a telehealth bill, a second one right now. And Brian Fitzpatrick. There are a few of the guys that I tend to do quite a bit of work with. And then what they've been able to do for me is to allow me to get to meet other people when I talk to them to say, who else on your side of the aisle do you think would be interested in this type of bill? But I'm going to tell you, I think the main thing is to show people that that I'm willing to do this, and that I am also willing to make sure that folks understand that I'm in it for communities. The very first bill that I was asked by a Republican who was one of the most conservative in the House, Virginia Fox, came up to me, I might have been 10 days in, and she said, I hear you're interested in putting more money back into our local communities. And I said, I have no idea who you are, but you're absolutely right. And so I became the original co-sponsor of four of us that was on this bill. And that was literally within 10 days of being elected, because I had told my colleagues and I had talked to other colleagues on the other side of the aisle about the priorities of Iowa. And for me, that means supporting local communities and main streets. And so getting the word out there, Drew, is one of the ways to get that done, because it also brings people to you when they want to get something done.
And that's effective governance right there. And one of the issues we've talked a lot about with our other candidates for federal office, as we've had these Zoom meetings, is infrastructure is something. Obviously, that's been a huge, huge issue. Obviously, you mentioned some of the floods, but not only with flooding and the levees and things like that, and the locks and dams, but also water, wastewater, and transportation infrastructure. A lot of communities, us included, we're kind of backlogged. We're a little bit outdated. We need to continue to update our infrastructure. Can you talk about the importance of infrastructure and maybe what you could try to do or what you have done to try to move the ball on that critical issue?
I couldn't agree with you more. And I believe it is, from an economic perspective, the number one way to move us out of the downfall that we've seen because of COVID. We've got to address the healthcare issue. We've got to shore up our small businesses with PPP loans, et cetera. But we've got to create jobs. And the best way to create jobs is through infrastructure. And it's needed. So for the last year and a half, I was able to be a partner on the WIP's Rural Broadband Task Force to help us put together a $100 billion broadband bill that will bring high-speed connectivity across this country, 100 megabits per second upload, download. For those of you, that means the kid can be watching a movie, the parent can be working, the older sister can be getting an education online, and the dad can be buying his wife a really nice present. Let's just say that, all at the same time. And there's still 75 megabits available. But it also has to be priced right, because we know all too well here that it doesn't matter if you can get it out there, it also has to be affordable. So we've made sure that it's affordable. Every single provider, and this is a public-private partnership, they have to provide one low-cost option at those speeds. And so you don't lose quality just because you can't afford it. You get a good product nonetheless. So broadband is one of the most important things we need to be addressing with infrastructure. But to your point, Drew, we got to dig once. And that means we've got to support our roads and bridges. You mentioned waters and sewers. Some of our sewers are about 100 years old. They are ripe for failure. And I don't want to see us get into a position here with people having dangerous water because it's not up-to-date system for what our needs are. So we've got to address that, as well as schools and hospitals. So these are all pieces that were part of the massive infrastructure bill that we passed out of the House this summer that I was grateful to be a part of, in particular from the broadband perspective. But I also made sure that we addressed rural opportunities. And I know I'm talking to folks here in Council Bluffs. You're not a rural area, but we're all surrounded by rural, and we are reliant upon rural no matter where you live in Iowa. And so I wanted to make sure that we got equally as much access for things like affordable housing in those areas as well. So all of these pieces come together. You can't just say we're going to look at roads and bridges. To your point, we've got to address the levee system, which is what I've already done in writing a companion bill with Senator Ernst to address the levee issues that we've seen across our district. And certainly when towns like Hamburg have to tear down a levee, I can't even imagine. That's throwing good taxpayer dollars after bad, to put people in harm's way by making them tear down a levee that could have kept them safe because it didn't meet their specific parameters. So we adjusted that. We made a bill to fix that. So I'm going to continue to work on those common sense solutions, and push for an infrastructure bill. I think that the bill that we've got is really comprehensive, and it's one that we can move forward because it's a public-private partnership, and it also includes sale of bonds, and it's a way that we can, lots of ways where we can fund this and make sure that it happens. So I'm going to continue to push for that bill to be made into law.
Well, thank you. And a follow-up question from one of our attendees is, you talked about rural broadband, but what about internet in smaller towns where connectivity is especially hard? People are sitting outside of public buildings, things like that, just to get internet connectivity. Can you speak a little bit more specifically to rural broadband is the question?
Yeah, well, that's what this bill does. That's what we created the task force for. It's the Rural Broadband Task Force. The whip of our house, Jim Clyburn, is from the Carolinas, and he has a district very similar to ours, where kids are sitting outside of a McDonald's getting homework done, and that's the reason why we decided to go after this. It has left too many communities like those in Iowa behind. It's left our children without as much opportunity from an education perspective, and it's left our businesses without the economic opportunity that some of the urban areas have had. So this is where rural is going to benefit the most. It's going to go out to the underserved and the unserved communities first. And the unserved communities are actually at number one. So anybody that's not connected gets first priority. Underserved is second priority. And then we work on creating better speeds in the areas that are already served. So this is really to put rural on the map when it comes to broadband.
Well, thank you for expanding on that. Our next question is from Superintendent Eric Nost with the Lewis Central Community School District. He thanks you for your interest in advancing career and technical education, and he asks, what are your plans to support public education in general, along with supporting funding for education in your next term?
Well, Eric, it's good to see you, and thank you for all you do. One thing I want to let you know that I was able to get into our appropriations bill this year for the very first time is language to support mental health for our teachers. And that means the resources will follow. First time ever in the history of appropriations for education that we were able to get this in. To me, that's a really important issue that we need to address. I'll tell you, I think that we really need to look at how we fund schools in this country. I don't believe that our current system is the way we need to go anymore. We cannot just rely on property taxes and the areas that you live to support our public schools, because that has created too much inequity in the system. I grew up on the south side of Des Moines. It's now 100% free and reduced lunch, food program in general for all the kids there. My kids went to school here in West Des Moines at a school in a really, a neighborhood where they got pretty much everything, where the parents, if the school didn't have the money for it, the parents could pool their funding together, get the nice bus to take them on field trips, pay for brand new equipment on the playground. That's unacceptable, so that the kids 10 miles away over here get something because their parents make more money and they live in an area where they get more. So I think we need to change this across the board. It's not working for this country anymore. There's too much inequity, and that means it's pushing inequity in our schools. So that's the first thing. Secondly, I want to make sure that we address the issues of ADA, Title IX, all of the things that we can do at a federal level, because in your job, the majority of funding for schools comes from states. It doesn't come from the federal, less than 10%. But we have a responsibility when it comes to those really specific areas of law to make sure that you get the support that you need. And that's supporting children with special needs, and making sure that we're leveling the playing field across the board for every child, no matter what zip code they come from, no matter what obstacles that they face. I want to make sure that it's an equal dollar amount for every kid, no matter where they live in this country, because too many kids are being left behind just because of a zip code that they were born into or a disability that they might have. And we have opportunities to overcome those by just addressing the resources needed to support those programs. And I promise you that I'll make that a priority.
Thank you, Congresswoman. The next question I have is kind of along the lines of education. It goes very closely with that and work career technical training, like we talked about. But workforce development is a really, really big issue. It's the number one issue our members and our employers are facing. We fortunately just hired a workforce development director here at the chamber to help with those issues. But can you talk a little bit about what you've done in your time in Congress, and then what you hope to continue to do to help address our workforce development needs?
Yeah, well, I've many things. I've done things where we have addressed specific industries where we have a shortage of workers. Physicians is a really good example of that in our rural communities. It's one of the bills that I helped author was our physician shortage bill. And I see that a need for us to continue to do that in lots of different industries that are important to states like ours, where we're seeing people leave, teachers included in that. I have worked to expand Pell Grants for working students to make sure that they can continue to receive the support that they need. It's a lot harder for a kid who's working to pay their way through college to be able to, do it in 4 years, and they need that extra support. I have authored with my colleagues policies that expand that relationship between K through 12 and the community and the businesses to develop a pipeline for those young people to go into the industries where they know they're going to have a job in that community. So we've authored bills to move that agenda forward. Finally, we need to bring more support into our into so many parts of this country with more community development block grants and economic opportunity, and we're working on that. And one of the things that I was able to do was to add to the Office of Advocacy for the Securities and Exchange Commission rural entrepreneurs. Because minorities and women they are addressed through the Office of Advocacy because they have a harder time getting access to capital, but so do rural entrepreneurs, and they have a tendency to stay in up in business longer. So I wanted to make sure that we had a focus on states like ours and the folks who are trying to put businesses together here to have more access to capital. So I think we just need to work on all fronts, working from our schools through our businesses, making sure that we develop that pipeline, ensuring that we've got the appropriate programs in our two-year colleges in particular to support that, because those are a lot of good jobs right now that we really need, especially in technology, where so much of those two-year programs are giving the businesses the employees that they need with the skill sets that they need, without strapping those young people with a 4-year degree that might not be as relevant for that job. So all to me works in tandem. I did this work at the state of Iowa with workforce development when I was at the Department of Management, and I see what I'm doing at a federal level just as a continuum of that, but at a more of a nationwide perspective, but certainly with a focus on Iowa.
And, obviously one thing that's really specific to Iowa and we excel at here in Iowa and within our district as well, we have Southwest Iowa Renewable Energy, SIRE, obviously, and some of the things they're doing producing ethanol and byproducts. But can you talk a little bit about renewable energy, biorenewable chemicals, renewable chemical production? Obviously, your role in the Ag Committee, you have a unique perspective seeing these kinds of issues. So can you talk a little bit about, what you see here in Iowa and what you hope to continue to move forward with in that regard?
Do you have till 10 o'clock? Because this is what I love. I think Iowa has the best opportunity of any place in this country. We should. I ran the state's energy and environment plan and helped make Iowa #2 in wind production in the country. I just wrote a bill, co-author a bill with some members of the Ag Committee to develop a new market for carbon sequestration. Let's literally develop a market to make money for our farmers by doing what's right and sequestering their carbon. But we also have a lot of other issues that we need to look at. So I've already been working with a select task force on climate as they've put together a 500-piece, I think it was 500-page policy piece that is being used to put information into climate bills that we're working on. And I made sure the two things: that farmers have a seat at the table, because we should not be making decisions about how our farmers are using their land with this assumption that we know better than they do. And unfortunately, too many of my colleagues who live on the coast, sometimes have thought that. So is able to make sure that within what we promote is a committee of farmers who will actually be a part of the decision making. Secondly, was able to get written into that policy a platform to promote biofuels, in particular ethanol, throughout this country and make it year round. And then third, I have one of my bills is my National Climate Bank, which is $35 billion that can be leveraged to for $1 trillion for investments in new energy projects. So we're going to bring that money back here. We're going to have entrepreneurs be able to develop new projects so that we can create energy with, and we're going to benefit from it. It also includes support. We've written bills to support research and development for renewable energy, and we need to continue to support that. And then I've been working with the Biden team, should he get elected, already, Governor Vilsack and I have, to ensure that ethanol and biofuels we get a greater opportunity domestically. We're being left out of markets like California at the rate that we should be because what I consider outdated policy that they've put in place. We certainly have issues with tariffs that are put on our ethanol for Brazil. Those are things I've been working with the U.S. Trade Ambassador in the office with. These things have got to get done. There's no reason we shouldn't be selling a great product that helps our country with its climate issues and puts money in the pockets of Iowans and farmers in particular. We're going to get those bills passed.
And I just have two quick questions for you to close out of respect for your time. Is if reelected, how will you continue to work with chambers and businesses in the business community in general to continue to move the ball forward on key issues? And then also, what can we do to help you as the chamber in the business community?
Yeah, well, one thing I want you all to be successful, which is why we fought in the last COVID bill to ensure that chambers were able to receive the funding that you need. So we're going to continue to push for getting that bill passed. We know that you serve a valuable purpose, definitely in states like Iowa. So I want to make sure that you get the resources that you need. I'm going to continue to come out and have in-face conversations with all of you, obviously virtually as long as we need to, listen to your concerns and bring those right back with me. We need to make sure that we've got a tax code that benefits businesses, small businesses, to make sure that Main Streets can stay alive. I want to make sure that the tax benefits just don't go to the largest publicly traded companies and the top 1%. You want to know why? That's not who Iowa is. Those opportunities need to come back to hardworking Iowans and small businesses, and our tax code needs to reflect that. We also need to make sure that we're supporting our community banking system in this state, which has done a really good job of helping communities get the funding that they need to open up new businesses and to expand. And I've been really grateful to hear that with so many people that I've talked to throughout COVID, not just their PPP loans have really been helpful, and the fact that community banks have helped them, but throughout the life of the career of their business, our community banks have been there for them. So I want to make sure that we ensure that they're not overburdened either, so that they can continue to support Iowans. We've just got a long way to go when after COVID is over to get people back to normal. We're going to have to work together to figure out exactly what that means. It's not going to be a one size fits all for everybody. Certainly, I believe we should be putting a national plan in place that will allow us to get tax breaks and incentives for businesses to purchase the PPE and the supplies that they need. This is directly impacting their bottom line and affecting their profitability. Right now, most of our bills are focused around revenue. We do have some tax incentive, obviously tax breaks for folks to write off those types of things. But I think as we move forward, we're going to have to work with businesses who will probably want to continue in the vein of putting those pieces in place from here down the road on how we can help them. I think about, when we were out walking on the 100 block just last week, and the businesses I talked to, and when I was talking to folks in Atlantic at the restaurant, they've all had to adapt in some way or another, whether it's doing more online, whether it's, kind of making a drive up capability, whether it's buying a food truck to, make sure that if your restaurant gets shut down, you've got some way to, support yourself. So what they've done is been really innovative about ways to increase revenue streams in case one gets cut off. we're going to have to figure out how we can work with them to keep supporting that innovation so that if something like this would ever happen again, and it doesn't have to come in the form of a pandemic, it could come in the form of other things. We want businesses to be able to survive. So I would like to see us do more in helping them with those innovative ideas and getting them the capital they need to support it.
And we're happy to help you anytime you need any assistance in Potawatomi County or Southwest Iowa. And the last thing I want to give you an opportunity to do just before we end the Zoom call here is just talk a little bit as to why you think you're the best candidate and what's kind of your selling points going into, 8 days out to the election, going into election day.
Well, I can tell you, it's pretty hard to outwork me. And if anybody tried, I'd just outwork them so they couldn't. I think that's been pretty evident in what I've been able to do for this state. Whether it was fighting to get $3 billion for flood recovery and changing policy to cover uninsured grain in bins, which would have cost our farmers hundreds of thousands of dollars. I was told those things couldn't happen. Cindy, you can't change that policy. And I said, that's not an option. We're going to change that. Or we can't get in this disaster bill because it was literally coming to the floor the week after our flood happened. And most people would say, I was told it's not going to be able to get in there. You're going to stop everything else. I said, that's not an option. We're getting in. We cannot wait 4 more months for a bill to go through for Iowa. So I stood up and made sure that that happened. I will every single day defend the people in the state, whether that means with my party or against my party. It's why I fought for farm aid in our budgets at the end of last year and this year when my leadership did not include it. And I don't believe that's happened to our farmers with this administration is their fault. And they need the money to support all themselves and our community. So I fought back and stood up against my leadership and said, I'm not going to be voting for those bills. And I whipped Midwesterners together, and the speaker didn't have the votes. She had to put it in if she was going to bring it to the floor. And that's just what she did. I realized early on, it takes the voice of 10 representatives for me. When I'm up there looking at how many votes come in from California and New York, and they work together on the issues they have, we have 4 representatives. And so we've got to be the voice of 10. And I've stood up every step of the way to make that happen. Whether it was bringing home biodiesel tax extenders in an 11-month period of time when my opponent in a full Republican House, Senate, and administration couldn't get that through and let those languish for 3 years, I got it done because I'm relentless when it comes to taking care of things for the people in this state. I honestly don't care what letters behind anybody's name, whether a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent. I don't care what zip code they come from. We're all in this together. We all do better when we all do better. And my job is to make sure that every single person's voice is heard out there. I was named the most accessible freshman member of Congress because I work incredibly hard. Not only the most accessible freshman member, but 3rd in the entire Senate and House. So I just have 2 guys I need to beat, and I'm going after them this time. So what I can tell you is, if you want a fighter in your corner, that's me. If you want somebody who's always going to stand up for what's right, that's me. I don't pull any punches and I don't tell people what they want to hear. I just get the job done and I do right by the people that I serve. And I hope that I get your support and your vote so that I can continue to support the needs of people in this district.
Well, thank you, Congresswoman Axne. We really appreciate your time and we appreciate your thoughtful responses to our questions. And thanks again for being with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for all you're doing. Take care and stay safe.
Yeah, you do the same. Best of luck the last 8 days.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.